Have you ever noticed something strange about the people who actually get things done? They rarely talk about motivation. You won't see them posting inspirational quotes, waiting for Monday to reset, or obsessing over a perfect morning routine and the right playlist. They just show up. They do what needs to be done, day in and day out, without the drama, the excuses, or the internal debate. While everyone else is still in bed, scrolling through their phones and waiting to feel ready, these people have already crossed the hardest task off their list. While others are watching self-help videos to pump themselves up, they have already finished their workout, done their reading, and put in the work. The most fascinating part. If you ask them how they do it, they never talk about their feelings. They don't mention inspiration. Instead, they point to something much older and far more powerful. Back in 10th century Japan, during the Heian period, there was an unwritten rule that separated ordinary men from legends. It wasn't about physical strength, though the men who lived by it were formidable. It wasn't about raw intelligence either, though the wisest scholars knew its worth. It was a state of mind the Japanese called Yamato Damashii. The spirit that keeps the body moving when every single nerve ending is begging you to quit. This single principle forged warriors who refused to break and generals who rewrote history. Centuries later, during World War II, this deeply personal philosophy was hijacked by the state, twisted into wartime propaganda, and used to justify horrific things. But the original essence of Yamato Damashii had nothing to do with war, empires, or nationalism. It was built on a much simpler, harsher truth: duty over who you are over how you feel. Action over appearance. Today, I want to unpack what this ancient concept really means and how it can take you from someone who knows a lot but does very little to someone who simply cannot help but execute. But first, let me tell you about a young man who had all the answers in the world, but not an ounce of courage to use them. Before we dive in, we need to clear one thing up. There are two kinds of drive. The first is excitement, the temporary rush you get after watching a great video or reading a powerful line. It feels good, but it burns out like a match in the wind. The second is what the Japanese tie to ikigai, your core reason for being, the underlying purpose behind everything you do. In this video, we're going to look at why relying on that first kind of drive is actually keeping you stuck, and why you need a foundation that goes much deeper. Before we go any further, I'd love to invite you to join us here at Presence and Purpose. We're building a community of people who are done with empty hype and ready for real change. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and leave a comment below. Be honest, what is the one thing you keep putting off? What is the goal you've been planning forever, but haven't actually started? Share it, and while you're down there, reply to someone else. Maybe your experience is exactly what they need to hear. Let's make this a space where we actually help each other grow, not just consume more content. Thank you for being here. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Man Who Knew Everything and Did Nothing. The year is 950, Heian period Japan. Ryota is only 24 years old, but he has already read more books than men twice his age. Born into a noble family, he has access to resources most people could only dream of: Chinese military classics, Buddhist texts, the strategies of Sun Tzu, and the philosophies of Confucius. While other young nobles spend their nights at banquets, writing poems about cherry blossoms and getting drunk on sake, Ryota studies. He buries himself in military strategy, battle formations, combat tactics, and the psychology of war. He has a dream: to become a great warrior, perhaps even a general who will change the fate of Japan. His mind is razor-sharp, and his memory is flawless. He can quote ancient text word for word and debate military theory with scholars decades older than him. But Ryota has a glaring problem, one that is slowly eating away at his soul. He cannot act. Every single morning, he wakes up with grand intentions. Today is the day, he tells himself. Today I finally pick up my sword and practice until my hands bleed. Today I push my body to its absolute limit. Today I stop acting like a scholar playing dress-up and actually become a warrior. But then, without fail, something happens. His eyes will catch a new scroll on his shelf, a text about a technique he hasn't completely mastered yet. And his mind will whisper, "How can you train if you don't fully understand the theory first? What if you practice it wrong? Shouldn't you study this one last thing?" So he reads, he studies, takes notes, and memorizes. By the time he finally feels ready to take action, the sun has set, the day is gone. Tomorrow, he promises himself. Tomorrow I'll definitely start. Soon the servants start whispering. The other nobles laugh behind his back, calling him the warrior of books. They mock him. He can kill you with text, but never with a blade. The insult cuts deeper than any sword because it is entirely true. He has enough technical knowledge to train a whole army, but he has never felt the burn of exhausted muscles. He has never hit the mental wall that separates the mediocre from the excellent, nor faced the real discomfort that turns theory into actual skill. His father, a stern man who served as a military advisor to a provincial lord, looks at him one evening and says something that will haunt Ryota forever. "You have the mind of a general but the heart of a clerk. All this knowledge without action is worthless. You are not a man, Ryota. You are a ghost pretending to be alive." Ryota doesn't sleep that night. His father's words echo like thunder in his mind. He knows it's true. All those years of study, all those books, all that knowledge, and he is exactly the same. Weak, hesitant, trapped inside his own head, paralyzed by his own thoughts. But the next morning, something changes. For the first time in years, Ryota doesn't open a book. He walks out the door. Chapter 2, The Meeting in the Woods. Ryota walks aimlessly through the forest near his family's estate. The morning air is bitter and biting, and the sun has barely cleared the horizon. He doesn't really know what he's looking for. Maybe clarity, maybe an excuse to go back to his comfortable life of books, or maybe just a walk to clear his head. That's when he hears it. A sharp, repetitive sound, metal cutting through air, wood striking wood. Steady, relentless, hypnotic. He follows the sound to a small clearing and stops dead in his tracks. There stands a man, perhaps 50 years old, with graying hair tied back in a simple bun. His body is covered in old scars, white lines across his arms and a jagged mark on his shoulder. He is moving with a wooden sword, practicing the exact same sequence over and over again. The same cut, the same stance, the same breath hundreds of times. Ryota watches, completely transfixed. There is no emotion on the man's face. No sign of struggle, no look of satisfaction, just pure, steady, relentless movement. So this is what discipline looks like, Ryota realizes. It isn't exciting. It isn't motivated. It's just being present. It's just doing. When the man finally stops, Ryota approaches him nervously. "Master," he says, automatically using the title of respect. "I've been watching you train. You have a level of discipline I've never seen before. Please, teach me." The man looks him up and down slowly, taking in the fine silk clothes, the soft hands without a single callus, and the posture of someone who has never done a day of real physical labor. "No," the man says flatly, turning away. "Wait," Ryota's voice cracks. "I've studied all the techniques. I know Sun Tzu's Art of War by heart. I know formations, strategies, the writings of the great generals. I learn fast, I promise." The man stops and turns around slowly. His eyes are hard as stone. "You know techniques?" There's a faint hint of amusement in his voice. "Good, go use them." And he keeps walking. Something snaps inside Ryota. All his pride, his entire identity as an educated nobleman shatters. "Please," he shouts. "I need to change. I need to be more than what I am." The man stops again. This time he is silent for a long moment. Finally, without turning around, he says, "You'll give up." "I won't," Ryota fires back instantly. "Everyone gives up. I won't." The man turns and reads Ryota's face carefully. He sees desperation there. But desperation is just another feeling, and feelings pass like clouds. Still, perhaps this young noble needs to learn that truth for himself. Tomorrow, the man finally says, "Before sunrise, right here. If you show up, I'll consider teaching you. If you don't, never come back. I'll be here, I promise. The man almost laughs. Promises, he mutters, as if words meant anything at all. Chapter 3. The first test. Ryota doesn't sleep a wink that night. Every time he closes his eyes, he sees the man's stern face and hears his voice, "You'll give up." He can't give up, not this time. He refuses to be the warrior of books anymore. He arrives at the clearing a full hour before dawn. It's freezing and pitch black. He waits there, shivering, watching for the first rays of sunlight to hit the trees. The man appears like a shadow. One moment the clearing is empty, the next he is simply standing there. He looks at Ryota with what might be surprise or disappointment. It's impossible to tell. "You came," the man notes. "It is not a compliment, I said I would." "Words," the man murmurs. "Today we'll find out if you have anything more than words." What follows is absolute hell. The man, who finally introduces himself as Kenji, starts with something deceptively simple, a basic fighting stance. Knees bent, hips low, back straight, arms extended, holding a wooden sword parallel to the ground. This position, Kenji explains, is the foundation of everything. "For how long?" Ryota asks. "Until I tell you to stop." 2 minutes in, Ryota's legs are shaking. 5 minutes in, he is drenched in cold sweat. 10 minutes in, every single fiber of his body is screaming at him to move, to stand up, to stop this madness. "Master, I don't think I can—" Silence. Kenji's voice cuts through the air like a blade. He is sitting on a rock, staring at Ryota with the same detached expression. "Your mind is telling you to stop. It lies. Your body is capable of far more than your mind wants to believe." 15 minutes. Tears well up in Ryota's eyes, not from sadness, but from pure physical agony. Every muscle is on fire. "Stop," Kenji says quietly. Ryota collapses forward, gasping for air as if he had just run a marathon. His legs won't stop shaking. He looks up at Kenji, hoping for what? Understanding? Encouragement? What he sees is disappointment. 15 minutes, Kenji says. "And you already want to quit? Do you think battles last 15 minutes? Do you think your enemies wait for you to feel comfortable?" Ryota lowers his head. The shame is overwhelming. "Go home," Kenji says, standing up. "You don't have what it takes." Something breaks inside Ryota. But from that break, something harder takes its place. "No," he says, forcing himself onto his shaking legs. "Let's do it again." Kenji looks at him with a sudden flash of interest. "You think anger will save you? This spite you feel right now will pass. Tomorrow morning you'll wake up sore, exhausted, and you won't want to come back. I will come back. Why? It's not a rhetorical question, it's a test." Ryota opens his mouth to answer, then closes it. Why would he come back? Because he wants to be a warrior. That's a feeling. Because he's ashamed? That's also a feeling. And Kenji is right. Feelings pass. "You don't know," Kenji observes. "And because you don't know, you won't last." He begins walking away. "Wait," Ryota shouts. "Tell me then. Tell me why I should come back." Kenji stops and turns slowly. "Because it is your duty." "Duty?" Ryota repeats, confused. "To whom? To yourself. To the man you promised to become. Listen closely. Motivation is a feeling. Duty is an order. Feelings change with the wind. Duty remains even in the storm." Kenji takes another step, then pauses one last time. "We Japanese have a word for this, Yamato Damashii. The spirit of the land. It's not about feeling like doing something. It's about doing it because it's who you are." Chapter 4, Day 2 and the first real lesson. Ryota returns the next day. Not because he wants to, his entire body is one massive ache. His legs can barely carry his weight, and every muscle protests with each step. But he remembers Kenji's words. Duty remains even in the storm. Kenji is waiting. This time his face shows a tiny hint of recognition. "You're back," he says. "I said I would be. Yesterday you said it with passion. Today you say it with exhaustion. Which one is truer?" Ryota thinks about it. "Today. Exactly. Yesterday you were motivated. Today you are fulfilling a duty. One disappears, the other doesn't." Kenji makes him take the exact same stance as the day before. But this time, before they start, he explains, Yamato Damashii isn't something you feel, it's something you do until you become it. Let's talk about what you studied in those books of yours. As Ryota holds the position, his legs all ready to tremble, Kenji asks, "What did you study? Strategies?" Ryota grits out through his teeth. "Tactics, formations, the classics." "And did that make you a warrior?" "No, why not?" Ryota doesn't answer right away, entirely focused on the white-hot pain in his thighs. "Because I didn't act." "Only partially correct," Kenji says. "The knowledge you get from books is useful. The classics teach strategy and wisdom. But there is an old saying, knowledge is of little use without Yamato Damashii." "Do you know what that means?" Ryota's legs start shaking violently. "It means you can know how to win every battle in the world, but if you don't have the grit to actually show up on the field, that knowledge is dead weight." Yamato Damashii is the spirit that turns theory into action. It's what keeps you moving when every part of you wants to stop. Ryota's legs give out. He hits the dirt. 20 minutes this time, 5 minutes longer than yesterday. Kenji nods. Progress. Not because you've gotten stronger. Your body is actually weaker than it was yesterday. You've progressed because you've learned that pain isn't the enemy. Hesitation is. Chapter 5, The Lesson of the River. On the third day, Ryota arrives at dawn. Kenji is waiting, but they don't stay in the clearing. Today, Kenji says, "You'll learn the difference between doing something when you want to versus doing it because you must. Follow me." They walk down to a nearby river. The current is fast, loud, and brutally cold. You can see the force of it in the way it breaks over the rocks, aggressive and unforgiving. Kenji points to a flat boulder right in the middle of the rushing water. "Go stand on that rock in your fighting stance until I tell you to leave." Ryota looks at the icy white water. "For how long?" "Until you understand." Ryota steps into the river. The water is so cold it feels like knives slicing through his skin. He lunges onto the rock, slips, nearly falls, but manages to catch his balance. He takes the stance. The freezing water splashes hard against his legs. The cold is unbearable. 5 minutes in, he is shaking uncontrollably. 10 minutes in, he can't feel his feet. 15 minutes in, panic starts to set in. Every cell in his body is screaming at him to get out of the water. "Master," he shouts over the roar of the river. "I can't take this. Your ancestors went through worse," Kenji shouts back from the dry bank. They stood on battlefields for days. They marched with open wounds. They fought until their very last breath. "And you can't handle cold water." "But why?" Ryota yells back. "Why do I have to do this?" "Because it is your duty." Kenji's voice echoes through the trees. "You asked me to teach you. You promised to become a warrior. That wasn't a request, it was a declaration. And declaration demand duty." Ryota closes his eyes. Tears stream down his face, mixing with the river spray. He thinks about quitting. It would be so easy. Just step off the rock, walk home, and go back to his comfortable life of books. But then he remembers his father's words. "You have the mind of a general, but the heart of a clerk." He hears the laughter of the other nobles, the warrior of books. All those years of studying, planning, and knowing, yet nothing ever changed. He is not that man anymore. Not here. Not now. The cold doesn't stop. The pain doesn't stop. But something shifts inside him. He stops fighting it. He just accepts it. "I am here because I choose to be. I stay because I must." Time loses all meaning. Eventually, Kenji calls out, "Get out." Ryota drags himself off the rock, his legs barely responding. Kenji helps him to the shore and leads him over to a fire that is already burning. 45 minutes, Kenji says. "You stayed out there for 45 minutes. Ryota stares at him, dazed. It felt like hours. "Do you know what happened out there?" Kenji asks. "For the first 15 minutes, you fought the discomfort. It exhausted you. Then you stopped fighting, you accepted that the cold was your duty, and oddly enough, it got easier. Not because the pain lessened, but because you stopped adding mental suffering to physical pain." Kenji throws another log onto the fire. "That is Yamato Damashii. It's not about numbness. It's about not letting your feelings dictate your actions. Did you feel cold? Yes. Did you want to leave? Yes. But you stayed because duty doesn't negotiate with discomfort. Chapter 6. The Root of the Spirit. That evening, Kenji lets Ryota rest early. They sit by the river, listening to the water rush past in the dark. Do you know why I'm teaching you this? Kenji asks. Ryota shakes his head. Because you are exactly the kind of man this concept was created to save. Kenji looks up at the stars. Centuries ago, our elite became obsessed with foreign culture, and for good reason. They had incredible knowledge, philosophy, strategy, art, and poetry. Our nobles threw themselves into these classics. They became brilliant scholars. But many of them became exactly like you were. They knew everything and did nothing. Knowledge without soul, theory without practice. Kenji continues, that's when our ancestors realized something vital. They needed a way to describe what separated men who just knew things from men who actually did things. It wasn't enough to have head knowledge. You needed Yamato Damashii, the native spirit, the inner drive that makes you act even when you don't want to. This wasn't about being against foreign ideas, Kenji explains. It was about recognizing that knowledge is just the tool, but the spirit is the craftsman. You can have the best sword in the world, but if you lack the courage to swing it, it's just a decorative piece of metal. The truth our ancestors discovered is this. Real wisdom, the ability to solve actual problems, make decisions under pressure, and act when action is required, doesn't come from books alone, it comes from doing. It comes from showing up and fulfilling your duty when every part of you wants to run away. Yamato Damashii was the difference between the scholar who debates war and the warrior who fights it. Between the poet who writes about courage and the man who acts with it. It's the difference between who you were 3 days ago and who you are becoming right now. Chapter 7. The Great Temptation. By the second week, Ryota has made real progress. He can hold his stances for much longer. His muscles are starting to respond properly, and his mind is beginning to quiet down. Then comes the real test. It's the Autumn Moon Festival. All the nobility will be there, music, poetry, sake, and celebrations. Ryota receives an invitation. The night before the festival, he can barely sleep. Not because he's excited to train, but because of the internal tug-of-war. He has trained 7 days straight. One night off wouldn't hurt, right? He tells himself he deserves a break, some fun, a bit of normalcy. On the morning of the 8th day, Ryota doesn't show up in the clearing. Kenji waits, watching the sun rise fully into the sky. Ryota never comes. Instead, Ryota is at home, sleeping off a long night of drinking and socializing. When he finally wakes up, it's late afternoon. The guilt hits him instantly, heavy and crushing. He broke down after only a week, despite all his grand promises. The next morning, he walks down to the clearing, expecting it to be empty. Surely Kenji has given up on him. But Kenji is there, waiting. His face isn't angry. It shows something much worse. Quiet disappointment. You missed yesterday, Kenji says quietly. It was the festival, I silence. It isn't a shout, just a weary command. You don't owe me an explanation. You owe yourself one, and you failed. Tears well up in Ryota's eyes. I'm sorry, please let me continue. It was a mistake, it was a choice. Kenji corrects him. You chose comfort over duty, pleasure over your word. And do you know what that proves? You still don't get it. You still think Yamato Damashii is something you only do when it's convenient. Kenji turns to walk away. Wait, Ryota begs, stepping forward. Give me one more chance, I understand now. I really do. Do you? Kenji turns back. Then tell me, what is Yamato Damashii? Ryota takes a deep breath. It's doing things even when you don't want to. Partially correct. Keep going. It's duty over feelings. That's a result, not the root. Deeper. Ryota closes his eyes. He thinks of the freezing river, the burning muscles, the long hours. Then it clicks. It's who I am, not just what I do, it's identity. When I broke my commitment yesterday, I wasn't just skipping a practice. I was betraying the person I declared myself to be. Kenji is silent for a long moment. Then he gives a slow nod. Now you're starting to understand. What Kenji does next completely breaks Ryota. He makes him hold the horse stance for 2 hours straight. No mercy, no breaks. As Ryota finally collapses, trembling and sweating through his clothes, Kenji looks down at him. This pain? You chose it yesterday. When you run away from your duty, you don't actually escape the consequences. You just postpone them, and they always come back worse. Chapter 8: Identity, not action. The next day, Kenji changes the lesson. Instead of physical training, he makes Ryota sit quietly. Do you think discipline is about forcing yourself to do difficult things? Kenji asks. Yes. No. Discipline is about being someone for whom those things are non-negotiable. There is a massive difference between I should train and I am someone who trains. One is a wish. The other is an identity. Kenji draws a line in the dirt with a stick. Look here. When you say I want to be a warrior, you create a gap between who you are now and who you want to be. That gap leaves room for negotiation. I want to, but not today. I want to, but I'm tired. I want to, but it's the festival. But when you say I am a warrior, there is no gap. There is no debate. Warriors train not because they feel like it, but because it's what warriors do. It's an identity, not a daily choice. Something clicks in Ryota's mind. So Yamato Damashii isn't about forcing yourself to act. Exactly. For the first time in weeks, Kenji genuinely smiles. Yamato Damashii is about embodying an identity so completely that action flows naturally. You stop asking, should I? And you just do it, because doing anything else would feel wrong. It's who you are. Think of the great warriors of the past, Kenji continues. They didn't wake up every morning deciding whether or not to train today. That question didn't exist to them. They were warriors. Warriors train. Simple. The problem with your book knowledge wasn't the knowledge itself. It was that you viewed yourself as a scholar who wanted to be a warrior, rather than a warrior who happened to study. See the difference? Ryota sees it clearly for the first time. In the coming months, Kenji says, I am going to teach you how to change your identity, not through thinking, but through repetition. So consistent that your body and mind have no choice but to accept that you are no longer the person you used to be. Chapter 9: The Shift. The following months are brutal, but something fundamental changes inside Ryota. He stops bargaining with himself. Kenji teaches him a simple rule: decide once, act 1,000 times. Ryota decides who he is, and then he simply lives as that person. No questions, no hesitation. For 90 days straight, he is there before sunrise, no exceptions. No, not today. No, I'm too tired. The question, am I going to train today, simply stops existing. Of course he is. Warriors train. He is a warrior. By week 6, something strange happens. Ryota starts waking up before dawn on his own, his body automatically preparing for the day. By week 8, he realizes he isn't even thinking about the effort anymore. He just shows up. Kenji watches with quiet satisfaction. See? Your brain finally accepted it. You're not forcing it anymore. It's just flowing. The real test comes on day 63. Ryota wakes up sick, feverish, shivering, muscles aching, head foggy. The old voice inside his head whispers, you need to rest today. He gets up anyway. He staggers down to the clearing. Kenji takes one look at him and sees his condition. You're sick, Kenji notes. I am. Why did you come? Ryota answers without even thinking about it, because that's who I am. Kenji smiles, not a small polite smile, but a wide grin of genuine pride. Now you understand. Yamato Damashii isn't about being unbreakable, it's about being unshakable. Not in your physical power, but in your identity. Go home, Kenji says gently. Rest today. You've proven your point. You didn't come to prove anything to me. You came because you couldn't help but come. You've changed. Chapter 10: The Final Lesson. Day 90, 3 months of non-stop training. Ryota is no longer the same man. Physically, he has transformed. Lean muscle where there used to be softness, thick calluses where his skin used to be smooth. But the real change is entirely invisible. Kenji sits him down one last time. You've finished your training period. Now let me tell you the truth. This was never really about the sword drills. Yamato Damashii is about death and rebirth. The Ryota who walked into this clearing 3 months ago, the man who knew everything and did nothing, he's dead. Every single day you woke up and chose duty over comfort, you were letting him die so a new version of you could be born. The books you read weren't wrong, Kenji continues. Your knowledge is incredibly valuable. But knowledge without soul is just a corpse, beautiful perhaps, but dead. Yamato Damashii is the soul that brings knowledge to life. It turns information into wisdom, theory into practice, and intention into reality. Kenji stands up. There's one last thing to show you. He leads Ryota to an open field. 20 armed men are waiting there. They are soldiers, real warriors. These men need an instructor, Kenji explains. Someone who understands strategy, but has also proven they can execute under pressure. Someone with Yamato Damashii. Ryota looks at the men, then back at Kenji. You're recommending me? No. I'm handing you your duty. You spent 3 months learning how to be a warrior. Now you're going to teach others, not through books, though your books are still useful, but through who you are. Through example, through Yamato Damashii. Chapter 11, 5 years later. 5 years pass. Ryota, now 29, has become exactly what he dreamed of. He isn't just a warrior. He's a general, a leader men follow not out of fear but out of genuine respect. He commands 300 soldiers and has already won 3 critical battles. But more importantly, he has passed on what Kenji taught him. His soldiers aren't the biggest or strongest men, and they don't have the flashiest equipment. But they have something enemy armies can't match. They don't hesitate. When an order comes down, they execute without internal debate or questioning. Not because they are mindless robots, but because of their identity. We are Ryota's men, they say. And Ryota's men don't break. One day a young recruit comes to see him. The boy is highly intelligent, studious, but physically weak. Ryota looks at him and sees his own reflection. General, the young man says, I've read all the manuals, I know every single technique. But during drills, I freeze. I know exactly what to do, but I can't make myself do it. Why? Ryota smiles. He has been waiting years for someone to ask this exact question. Because you have knowledge without a soul. Knowledge tells you what to do. Yamato Damashii makes you do it. Come with me tomorrow before sunrise. I'll teach you what no book can. And the next morning, in a quiet clearing in the forest, the cycle begins all over again. Chapter 12, The Twist and the Return. Ryota lives to be 67. He sees Japan change in many ways, but he never forgets Kenji's teachings, and he never stops living by Yamato Damashii. But the story doesn't end with men like them. Centuries later, in the years leading up to World War II, the concept was hijacked. Militaristic governments took Yamato Damashii, this beautiful idea of completing your knowledge with real-world action, and twisted it into something dark. They claimed it meant dying blindly for the emperor, using it to push extreme nationalism and fanatical obedience. But that wasn't Yamato Damashii. That was wartime propaganda wearing a sacred name. The original concept that Kenji taught had nothing to do with national superiority. It was about personal superiority, not being better than other people, but being better than you were yesterday. It was about the war inside yourself. It was about killing the version of you that negotiates, makes excuses, postpones things, and knows better but refuses to act, so you can step into someone who simply executes. Not out of raw emotion, but out of identity. Today, the term still carries scars from that dark period, and many people in Japan avoid using it. But the underlying truth never died. It lives on every single time someone chooses duty over how they feel. Every time someone shows up when they don't want to. Every time someone turns knowledge into action, theory into practice, and intention into reality. Chapter 13, Putting it into practice. Today, you don't need to be a samurai to live by Yamato Damashii. You don't even need to be Japanese. Because at its core, this isn't about geography. It's about a universal human truth. And that truth is this: motivation is a myth. Motivation is just a feeling, and feelings change with the weather. On Monday, you're motivated. On Wednesday, you're tired. On Friday, you give up. On Sunday, you promise yourself you'll start fresh next week. This cycle is what kills dreams, stifles potential, and ruins who you could become. Yamato Damashii is the way out. Here is how you use it. First, stop making promises about what you'll do. Start making declarations about who you are. Don't say, "I'm going to go to the gym today." Say, "I am someone who takes care of their health." Don't say, "I should read more." Say, "I am a reader." The shift seems tiny, but it changes your entire mental landscape. Second, understand that duty is non-negotiable. When you say, "I am someone who does X," you aren't setting a loose goal. You are defining your identity. And your identity doesn't take days off. You don't get a day off from being you. Third, accept that growth requires discomfort. Breaking old, comfortable patterns hurts. Building good habits and dropping bad ones is unpleasant. But that discomfort is like bitter medicine, unpleasant at first, but it fixes the problem. Fourth, knowledge without action is just an illusion. You can study fitness for years and stay weak. You can read every business book on the market and stay broke. You can learn everything about human psychology and stay lonely. Why? Because you have the data, but you don't have the spirit to execute it. Knowledge shows you the path. Yamato Damashii makes you walk it. Fifth, consistency beats intensity every single time. Ryota didn't become a warrior in one day of manic training. He became one by showing up for 90 days straight, even when he was sick, tired, or entirely unmotivated. Real change doesn't come from one massive heroic effort. It comes from 1,000 tiny acts of showing up. Don't worry about doing something heroic today. Worry about doing something small today, and then doing it again tomorrow. Chapter 14, The Final Secret. There is one last secret that Kenji taught Ryota on his very last day, something that completely changes how you view discipline. After those 90 days, Kenji said something that sounded like a total contradiction. "Now that you've mastered Yamato Damashii, I'm going to teach you when to break it." Ryota was baffled. "Break it, but you said duty is non-negotiable." "It is," Kenji confirmed. "But there is a world of difference between breaking a commitment out of weakness and adjusting it out of wisdom. Yamato Damashii isn't about self-punishment. It's not about destroying your body or mind for the sake of a rigid rule. It's about serving your larger purpose, not blindly following a checklist. If you are truly sick, not lazy but genuinely ill, resting isn't breaking your duty, it's honoring it. You are resting so you can perform better tomorrow, not running away because you don't want to do the work today." See the difference? Ryota saw it clearly. It all came down to intention. Warriors rest strategically to fight harder, Kenji said. Cowards rest emotionally to avoid the fight. Same action, opposite intentions. The test is simple. Ask yourself why you are stopping. If the answer is because I don't want to, it's too hard, or I think I deserve a break, you are bargaining with yourself. Kill that thought and get to work. But if the answer is because my body genuinely needs to recover so I can perform at my best tomorrow, that's strategy, not a compromise. Yamato Damashii without wisdom is just fanaticism. Yamato Damashii with wisdom is mastery. Never mix up the two. That was the final and most important lesson. The goal of discipline was never to turn people into mindless robots. It was to create people who move with deep purpose, who understand that duty serves something greater. Duty isn't a prison sentence. It's the ultimate freedom, the freedom of deciding once, so you can live 1,000 times without the constant, draining burden of trying to decide what to do every single morning. The choice is yours. Ryota's story ends here, but the truth he uncovered is waiting for you right now, in this exact moment. You don't need more motivation. Motivation is a fuel that runs dry fast. You need an identity so clear that action isn't a daily debate. It's just what happens next. You need to accept that all the knowledge, the courses, the books, and the strategies you've accumulated are entirely useless without the grit to execute them. Knowledge is of little use without Yamato Damashii. You need to accept that the person you are right now, the one who knows what to do but won't do it, who plans but never builds, who promises but never delivers, that version of you has to go. And you are the one who has to defeat them every single day by choosing your duty over your comfort, by showing up when it's inconvenient. In that old self's place, something new will take root. Someone steady, someone who doesn't negotiate. Someone people look at and wonder how do they do it, and the answer will be incredibly simple: you don't do it. You are it. That is Yamato Damashii. It's the line between dreaming a life and actually living it, between wanting to be someone and just being them. When you finally get this, not just in your head, but deep down in your bones, you'll realize you don't need motivation ever again. Because you won't be forcing yourself to do things anymore. You'll just be living out who you are. And that person simply cannot help but move forward. If this video shifted how you look at discipline, I'd love to invite you to subscribe to Presence and Purpose. We're building something real here, a community of people who are done with empty hype and ready for actual change. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you don't miss where this journey goes next. And look, leave a comment right now. Tell me honestly, what is the one thing you've been putting off? What do you know you need to do but keep pushing to next week? Share it. And while you're down there, reply to someone else who left a comment. Maybe they need advice in an area where you have some real-world experience. Let's build an actual community of people helping each other out. Remember, knowledge without action is just dead data taking up space in your head. Knowledge with Yamato Damashii is the power to completely reshape your life. The choice is yours, but make it fast. Every single day you put it off, your old habits grow stronger. One day they will win for good, unless you decide to defeat them today. If you've watched this far, thank you for your time. You've already shown you have a level of focus most people don't. Now go put it to use. Take action, be present, walk with purpose. I'll see you in the next one.